The desert stretched wide and empty as far as the eye could see, a scorched silence broken only by the low hum of tires crunching over gravel. An old pickup truck rolled to a quiet stop near a rundown cartel checkpoint, sun-bleached, forgotten by the world, but buzzing with danger. Inside the truck, Earl Stone, weathered, quiet, and 88 years old, took a long breath. He didn't need to see the men with guns to know they were watching, and they were. Two cartel foot soldiers stepped forward, R's slung tight across their chests, tattoos inked deep on forearms that had forgotten mercy. Earl climbed out slowly, every movement creaking like rusted metal. His worn boots hit the sand. A man from the shadows emerged, younger, louder, and clearly trying too hard to assert power. "You're late, old man," the cartel thug sneered, circling Earl like a vulture. "We don't like that." Earl blinked, then gave a half-smile. "Well, I don't like a shoals," he replied. Calm as sunrise. Silence. Even the wind held its breath. The cartel men froze, caught between confusion and insult. One of them chuckled nervously. The other gripped, his weapon tighter, waiting for a sign to react. But Earl didn't flinch, didn't bluff. He just stood there, unimpressed and unafraid, as if time itself worked for him. That line, that defiance, didn't come from arrogance. It came from a man who had lived through love, war, loss, and enough regret to drown 10 lives. A man who had buried friends, wives, and mistakes. A man who had run out of patience for punks with power and no respect. Behind Earl, in the bed of the truck, were millions of dollars in drugs. But that moment, that standoff? It wasn't about money. It was about dignity. And FEARLESSNESS. Because sometimes the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one with the gun. It's the one who just doesn't care anymore. The thug's smirk faded. Like desert mist, Earl Stone stood with the kind of stillness that made younger men nervous. Not because he looked dangerous, but because he didn't look afraid. And men like him only came in 2 types. Too dumb to fear, or too experienced to bother. "You think you're funny?" the second cartel enforcer asked, stepping closer. Earl squinted into the sun, unbothered, and reached for a cigar from his shirt pocket. Slowly, deliberately, he lit it, puffing once, twice. Then he looked the younger man in the eye. "I think I've earned the right to speak my mind. I've buried folks tougher than you." That line landed harder than any bullet. The man bristled, but didn't answer. He knew what the others did. This wasn't just a driver. This was a ghost from another time. A man who'd survived decades of mistakes, pain, war, and work. A man who probably looked death in the eye more than once and just kept walking. Inside the safe house, more cartel men gathered, watching through cracked blinds. They were used to fear. They were used to control. But what do you do with a man you can't intimidate? You can kill him, sure, but not before he makes you feel like a fool. And Earl Stone had made them feel exactly that. One of the lieutenants, older than the rest, finally stepped outside and waved his hand. "Let him through," he said in Spanish. "He's not the problem. He's the product." The younger men backed off, confused but obedient. As Earl walked past them, he paused, just long enough to add one more cut to their pride. "Next time, send one with manners, or send someone with a backbone." He didn't look back, didn't need to. They wouldn't forget him, not today. Not ever, because there are men who threaten with bullets. And then there are men like Earl Stone, who don't need bullets at all. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was colder than the desert. Wind. Boxes were stacked high, guards patrolled the shadows, and conversations fell to whispers the moment Earl entered. Most men in that room had killed for less than what was riding in the back of his truck. And yet, Earl walked in like he owned the place. And in a way he did. He moved past 2 armed guards and stopped at the center table, where several cartel lieutenants studied phones, maps, and ledgers. Their eyes flicked up at him with a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. One tried to bark instructions. "Unload it over there. Then leave." But Earl didn't move. He dropped the keys on the table instead. "You want it? Unload it yourself." Silence rolled over the room, thick and electric. One of the younger lieutenants laughed, thinking it was a joke. Another reached for his waistband, but the elder man who had allowed Earl to pass earlier raised a single hand. "No," he said, quietly in Spanish. "Let him speak." Earl lit another cigar and leaned against a steel crate. "You boys think you're in charge because you've got guns, tattoos, and big trucks. But let me tell you something. You don't run this? I do. Without me, your product doesn't move. Without me, your money doesn't flow. You don't have a pipeline. You have a pile of nothing." His words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They were true. For a moment, no one challenged him. Because in that dusty warehouse, surrounded by men half his age and twice as armed, Earl Stone held the power. Not because he was stronger, not because he was faster, but because he understood something they didn't. Fear fades, but respect lasts. And that respect? He just earned it, not by barking orders, but by showing them that he wasn't afraid to die, because he already lived more than any of them ever would. "You treat me like a mule," he added, walking back to his truck. "But remember, even a mule will kick when pushed too far." No one stopped him. No one dared, because the line between legend and threat had just blurred. Back on the road, the desert blurred past the window of Earl's truck as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire-orange streaks. The delivery had been made. The money would move. And by all measures, he should have just gone home. But Earl wasn't a man who stayed silent anymore. The cartel thought they had found a reliable old man, invisible, obedient, harmless. What they got was someone who'd buried his regrets, but not his guts. And now, the quiet whispers had begun in the cartel's inner circle. One of the lieutenants leaned in close to the boss. "He's not just running drops. He's asking questions. He knows the roots. He's not afraid of us." The boss, calm, brutal, calculated, didn't respond. He didn't need to. Earl had become more than just a mule. He'd become a liability, but back in his motel room, Earl didn't seem worried. He stared at the stack of money sitting on the bed, blood money, enough to buy a new life. Or end the one he still had. He looked in the mirror, his face cracked with age and time, but his eyes, they were still sharp. That's when he made the decision. He called his ex-wife's care center and asked how much her treatments would cost. Then he called his daughter. For the first time in years, and finally, in the most dangerous move of all, he made a second call. To someone he shouldn't have? "You still wearing a badge?" he asked the voice on the other end. "Yeah," the man said. "Why?" "Because I've got something that could bring a few devils to their knees." He hung up. Earl Stone, cartel mule, ghost of the past, forgotten man, was about to flip the game upside down. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want redemption. He just wanted to do one thing right before the road ran out. The morning came slow and pale. Earl drove alone, the truck humming across the highway like a man humming his own funeral song. In the glove box sat a flash. Drive, names, routes, faces. Everything the DA needed to cripple the cartel. He had packed it neatly between a cheap flashlight and an old photograph of his ex-wife laughing in the garden. Years before her illness, he wasn't driving a shipment anymore. He was driving truth. At the arranged meeting spot, an empty rest stop outside El Paso. 2 black SUVs waited, parked like vultures. D agents emerged, hands on weapons, unsure if this was real or another setup. And then they saw Earl. Old, alone, calm. He handed over the flash drive without a word. "I don't want a deal," he said. "I'm not asking for a pass. Just tell my family I tried to make it right." The agent stared at him, confused. "You?" "No, they're going to come for you." Earl shrugged. "They've been coming for me my whole life." Later that evening, at the same warehouse where he once defied the cartel, men in suits burst through the doors. Guns were drawn, lies were shouted. The empire cracked from within. Betrayal, chaos. Panic. And somewhere far from that storm, Earl was planting flowers. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He just showed up to visit his ex-wife's grave, hat in hand, and told her the truth. "I was too late for us, but maybe not for them." When the cartel finally found him, he didn't fight. He stood with dignity, looked them in the eye, and smiled, because Earl Stone may have been old, But he wasn't broken, and he died not as a mule for someone else's empire, but as a man who chose finally to carry something honest,